أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Today we will be talking about the life of Rumi and his teachings, and in the second part of the the conference we will share one story from Mathnawi, and after sharing this story we will try to get some lessons. We will try to get some lessons from Rumi and why he wants to share this story with us. So Jalaluddin Rumi, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, simply known as Rumi, was perhaps one of the best poets of all time, and he definitely had a great influence on Muslim writing and literature and culture. And his poetry, his books, known also as Mathnawi, Fihi Ma Fi, are still well known throughout the modern world, in the East and in the West. And he's probably one of the best poets of all time. So when we look at Jalaluddin Rumi's life, he was born in 1207 in Balkh. Today it's one of the cities in Afghanistan. And when he was about 11 years old, his father wanted to leave the city of Balkh. And his father was one of the important scholars of the time. He was also known as Sultanul Ulama, the kings of scholars. So, under the increasing Mongol invasion at the time, his family decides to move from today known as Afghanistan. So, along the way, they travel to different cities. They come to Baghdad, they go to Mecca and Medina, they make the pilgrimage. They come to Damascus, also known as Sham, and they settle in the city of Karaman. And upon the invitation from the governor of Konya, at the time, Sultanul Ulama, his father, Bahatun Walad, Rumi and his family, they all come to the city of Konya. And from then on, Rumi spends most of his life in the city of Konya. Now, we said Rumi's father, Bahatun Walad, had a great influence. He was a Sufi mystic as well at the time, and he was one of the prominent scholars. And Rumi's first teacher, Rumi's first scholar was his father. And both his father and Rumi were firm believers in the teachings of the Quran and in the teachings of the Sunnah, the path of the Prophet. And the influence of the Quran and the Sunnah, the teachings of the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet, the lives of the companions and the great lives of the saints had a great influence on the writings of Rumi. And when we look at the stories of Rumi in the Mathnawi, we will see the trace, we will see the influence of each source. So in fact, much of his work, much of his Mathnawi is dedicated to explaining the sources, the Quran and the Sunnah, and encouraging people to experience the internal taste of the religion. Because sometimes people are blindly following the scholars, and they blindly do the prayers, they blindly fast. But Rumi wants to go deeper. Okay, you have to do the external rituals, but when you do the rituals, you also have to experience the internal meaning of the ritual. So he in the most of his life is dedicated on waking people up to experience the internal, the taste of the religion. So when we look at Rumi's life, he spent early of his years learning and studying Arabic, law, Islamic jurisprudence, fiqh, also known as fiqh, hadith, the sayings of the Prophet, and history, the Quran, theology, also the the present time studies, courses like philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. And even by the time of his father, by the death of his father, he was a prominent scholar. He was one of the outstanding scholars of his time, and he took over his father's position in Konya, and he was regarded as one of the scholars, Islamic scholars in the country. And he spent his life teaching and giving lectures to public, to his students, until he was 35. And in 1244, Rumi's life changed. He met a traveling Sufi. His name was Shamsi Tabrizi. And the whole course of his life changed at that moment. Shams and Rumi became two close friends, and they developed a very close relationship. And at that time, Rumi became more and more secluded. He spent more time with Shams, and he couldn't attend lectures with his students. He couldn't attend the lectures with the public. And that's why his relationship with Shams caused great jealousy among his followers, among his family. And after years, Shams disappeared. And some of them believe that he was murdered, Shams was murdered. But Rumi himself never believed he was murdered. He thought he was somewhere else. So he traveled, he sent people for years looking for his friend, for Shams. And that's why we believe that it was this loss or this disappearance that led him outpouring of his soul through his poetry. So, how did Rumi write his stories? How did he write his poetry? He actually never took his pen and wrote them down. The 6 books of poetry in the Mathnawi actually were written entirely by Rumi, but he would compose them and he would dictate his poetry, and his student, known as Sam Chelebi, he actually would listen to Rumi and he would put the poetry in the books and edit them. And he clearly, his poetry, this should be clear, his poetry and his stories are based on 2 sources. One of them is the Quran, and the second one is the teachings of the Prophet, the Hadith and Sunnah. And he says, I am the servant of the Quran as long as I live, and I am the dust on the path of Muhammad, the chosen one. So we said, Mathnawi in Rumi shares many simple and funny stories. And why does he share so many simple and funny stories in the Mathnawi? Because he believes that these stories, these tales that he shares, they reveal something very profound about the human nature and how things ought to be. And the intention behind these stories, the intention behind each story is that it should be used as a guidance for human beings. It should be used as a guidance to guide human beings to good morals, to ethics. And that's why in each story that we read in Mathnawi, we try to be reflexive. Each story in Mathnawi encourages human beings to be reflexive on these stories. We don't just read the stories externally. We also look for the deeper meaning. We look for the deeper meaning in each story, behind each story. So today, I'll be sharing a story from Mathnawi. There will be two animals in this story, and it talks about the importance of friends, importance of choosing right friends. And let's start with this story, inshallah. So once upon a time, there was a mouse, and he was walking. He was passing by a pond, and at that point he saw a frog emerging from the depth of the pond. So he saw a frog emerging from the pond. He was surprised. He was astonished. It was the first time seeing a frog coming out of the pond. He wanted to talk with the frog, and he came, and they had a very warm and friendly conversation. Actually, a very close relationship, a friendship grew between the two of them. They became really close friends. And by mutual agreement, they appointed a specific time at which they could meet each other in the mornings daily and converse with each other for a long time. They said, in the morning, let's meet at this place and let's converse. Let's have a conversation, because they were really good friends. And in these special meetings, they used to enlighten each other. They would used to tell stories to each other. They would share their opinions on special subjects, and they would tell exciting stories about their past. And they enjoyed their friendship. So one day, the mouse said to the frog, he said, you are swimming around in the water, and I'm left alone in this dry earth. I suffer because I don't want to be away from you. And when I'm lonely, when I feel lonely, I come to the edge of the water. I want to call you, but since you are in the water, you cannot even hear my voice. Even the voice of the loved cannot be here. So, okay, we meet in the mornings, but I cannot be peace by meeting you for such a short time each day. The mouse still continued. He said, "Oh, my beloved friend, oh, beloved frog, I cannot live a moment of my life peacefully without seeing your face. By day, in the morning, the sight of you is my life. By night, the thought of you is my tranquility and sleep. And I have a request from you. I want something from you. And it will be very delightful on your part that you will permit me the pleasure of meeting you at every opportunity possible. So I want to see you more. I want to create more possibilities for conversation with you." And the mouse still carried on. He said, "Oh, my dear friend, oh, my respected friend, I am a creature that can live only on land. I cannot survive in the water. But you are able to survive in the water and on the land. So, how is it possible for you to know inside the water that I will have the desire to meet you? So, how can you know that when I want to meet you, how can you know that sometimes I want to meet you and you're in the water, and how can I let you know? How can I call you?" So for a while they thought about this, and they talked to each other for a while, and they came up with a couple possibilities. But the mouse put an opinion forward. And he said, let's have a string, and you will tie one of the end of the string on my leg, and we will tie one of the string on the other leg. So one string will be on my leg, and the other end of the string will be on your leg. So so when you go into the water, this is a short string, but there's let's imagine a long string. So one of them will be on my leg, and one of the end of the string will be on your leg. So when you are in this water, and when I want to talk to you, I will pull the string. So I will pull the string, and when I pull the string, you can come and we can have a nice conversation again. The frog started thinking, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? And he considered the mouse suggestion to be a bad one, and he started thinking in his heart, this is not good. This evil one, this evil idea wishes to tie me up, and he wants me to live like a prisoner. He couldn't say his desire or his thought directly to his friend, and he couldn't resist, and he accepted the request. He said, okay, let's tie one of the end of the string to my leg, and let's tie the other end to your leg. And the mouse, whenever he felt lonely, he would pull the string, and the frog will come out of the water, and they will start conversing again. And days passed by. And one day something bad happened. A vulture was flying, and he saw the mouse on the floor. And that was a good prey for him. And the vulture flew over, and he grabbed the mouse with its beak, and he took as he grabbed the mouse, he flew to the top of the mountain. As he flew to the top of the mountain, also the frog came out, because they were tied by the string, and the vulture took both of them to the mountain, and he ate them. And both the mouse and the frog were killed. The vulture killed them and ate them. And so, if the frog remained in the water, and if he had not formed a friendship with the evil mouse, maybe nothing would have happened, and he would not have been a prey for the vulture. And at this point, in this part of the story, Rumi radiallahu anh, he comes in, and he uses this story as an example to draw our attention to the harms and effects of having a bad company, to the harms and effects of having bad friends. And it's a very good story with a powerful moral lesson. So, Hazrat Rumi radiallahu anh, he says, in this story, he says, we see the soul, the spirit, the self, and shaitan. Three elements: the soul, the self, and the shaitan. So, what is soul in the story? What is the self in the story? And what is the shaitan in the story? He says, the self represents the mouse. The soul represents the frog. And the vulture represents the shaitan. So the self, in order to satisfy its needs, engages the soul in evil practices. The soul, no, the self wants to tie the self to itself. The self wants to act together with the soul. And when the soul reluctantly obeys the desires of the self, and when he becomes friend with the self, it actually allows itself, the soul actually allows itself for the shaitan, for the vulture, to pull it whenever it wishes. So, in this way, the soul, which is the spirit, which is the pure one, is also humiliated because of the contact with the self. Therefore, when the shaitan goes to hell, it takes the self to the hell, and also the soul, which is attached to the self, also goes to hell. So, from this story, Rumi wants to show that we need to choose our friends rightly. We need to, if a friend is not good, we need to get away from him, and we need to be on the path of good friends. And when our soul, when our spirit is tied to the self, we become slaves. Our soul becomes a slave for the self, and it becomes easy for shaitan, it becomes easy for evil to pull it to wherever it wants. So it's true, mankind, our human beings, we cannot live alone. Insan, the individual, the human being, must live in a community. We are all born in a community, and we must live with human beings, and we must interact with human beings. El-insan medeniyun bit-tab. El-insan, the human being, is a social being, and we must continue our relationship with other human beings. So what does it mean? What does this mean? So this means when we have friends, we will be upon the same methodology as our friends. We will be on the same path as our friends. We will have the same nature. We will have the same behavior. We will have the same manners. So that's why we must be careful about whom we friends. So the connection between friends must be upon sincere brotherhood. So what does Rumi wants to teach in these stories about getting away from a bad friend? So we need to notice who feels like a bad friend. We need to notice who makes us uncomfortable, who pressures us to do things that we don't want to do. And these types of friends are bad influences because they don't respect your opinion. They don't respect your values. So if they pressure you, if they make you guilty, we need to get away from them. We need to notice them. We need to notice, and we need to look for friends, who use drugs. We need to look for friends who are disrespectful. We need to look for friends who are mean to others. And we need to look for friends who are destructive of property, who are violent. And we need to get away from friends who try to manipulate you. And we need to look for friends who guide you in a good. We need to look for friends who guide you in a wrong way. Yeah, there might be friends who guide you in a wrong way. So we need to look for them. So second step, maybe we have to realize the effects that this friend has on us. Maybe for a while we have been noticing this effect, and maybe we have given them. We may be trying to give them more chances, but at some point we need to take some time and think about the bad effects that these people have on us. And how do we distinguish the good effect from the bad effect? So in the Quran it says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Cooperate in righteousness and piety. So good friends always cooperate in righteousness. They compete in doing good things, and they compete in piety. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. They don't cooperate in sin and aggression. Good friends always call you to righteousness and piety, and bad friends, they call you to sin and aggression. So in the second step, we need to realize the effects the friends has on us, and we should notice them. And if we can, we need to talk to them. We need to confront them. We need to confront someone who has a bad influence on us. And we have to take the responsibility, and we should talk to them. We should say, okay, you are a good friend, but I don't want to be around you smoking and drinking. And if you go back to the story of Rumi, the frog couldn't resist. He couldn't talk to his friend. He couldn't take the responsibility. He realized that this relationship is not good. He will be a slave to the mouse, but he couldn't have the responsibility. He couldn't have the guts of going to the mouse and talking to him and confronting him. So when we are in a bad relationship, or when we have bad friends who guide us in a wrong direction, we need to have the guts. We need to have the courage to talk to them and confront them. So we don't end the relationship entirely. We set the boundaries. We set the boundaries with our friends. So to protect ourselves and to protect them, we set the boundaries. And we need to be direct and clear about what we need from them. And we limit the time we spend with them. We express our feelings and needs honestly. Maybe we cannot force them to change, because change is up to them, but we can call them and we can talk to them, and we try to guide them in a good direction. So if setting boundaries doesn't work as well, we end the relationship. We still talk to them, but we keep it at the minimum. And we let them know that it's not because of who they are as a person, but because of their relationship. And we say, I really care about you, but our friendship is not working anymore. So we can conclude our lesson here, and we can conclude with a dua, inshallah. May Allah grant us, inshallah, the ability to choose between what is right and what is wrong, and inshallah, may Allah grant us the protection from oneself and from shaitan. And we will have the last minutes with a recitation from me.
you.